Welcome back to another episode, a mini episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. And today I'm going to tackle something that, has been in the news today. This is about Russell Brand and the allegations around sexual assault, rape, and emotional abuse. And, it's a serious allegations, I think. And, well, not think, they're very serious allegations. And I have some thoughts around it. And it's not about my judgments about whether he's guilty or not guilty or right and wrong and so forth. But this is more a way to kind of think about these situations, both for men in general and people who have sex in general, but for also the rest of our lives when we are faced with something that's occurred to us or that is being said about us that we find really hard to marry with who we think we are inside, but also talking about the nature of perception and the nature of how 2 people, 3 people, 4 people can experience the same event and have very different viewpoints and experiences, and some could find it joyful and some could find it incredibly traumatizing. So that's what I'm going to get into today. And I'm going to start with an experience I had. I'm going to kind of weave this in as I talk about this. I went on Vipassana, which I talked about, right, on my podcast, or maybe I didn't, maybe it's on the Instagram, but I went on Vipassana about probably a month and a half ago. And when I was there, I was meditating for 10 days, 10 hours a day for 10 days. And one of the questions that popped into my head was, is there any women out there that think, feel, or believe that I raped them? Yeah, is there a woman or any women out there that believe that? And when that question popped into my head, it really stuck. And I say it stuck for probably thinking about this on and off for 4 to 5 days. And my first reaction was like, no, like, an intense emotion of like defense. And I've been a good man and I've always, respected women and, so forth. I've got sisters. Like, that's the thinking I had initially. And then as the thought kept coming back again, the question kept coming back, I thought about it more and more. And I really found myself going down a bit of a rabbit hole, actually, of thinking, because, a bit like what Russell's experiencing here, he's experiencing, some women coming forward and with some allegations, and his stance has been to defend himself and say that they're not true. He, massively refutes them, and that it's a, possibly a conspiracy of mainstream media trying to take him down, which is a slightly different issue. He's not really dealing with the actual allegations and being like, okay, what was going on in my life? And actually would be willing to listen, but I will get back to that piece in a minute. And it's a really big, complex question, right? And something that I've learned through coaching people, especially in the last probably 3 years, where I've been really heavily coaching people, is how 2 people can have vastly different experiences of the same event. We've had the experience of maybe having a discussion with a friend of ours and us walking away with 2 very different perspectives on what occurred. One person might feel it was a friendly exchange. Another person might feel like they were victimized and made to feel like they were belittled and so forth, right? Because we come at everything with our own perceptions of reality and of what's happening. And when you mix in the fact that, Russell, very openly and honestly, was a heroin and crack addict, if I remember rightly, for a number of years, drunk very heavily and so forth. If you were under the influence in that way, which I've been in my life, not necessarily heroin and crack, alcohol and various other drugs, our ability to see reality as it is becomes impaired. Right? Again, we've all had that experience of being drunk and not really seeing things as they are, not hearing conversations as they are, and so forth, right? This doesn't make us bad people for having this experience, because this happens when people are perfectly sober as well. But in those states of being under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or even our own negative thoughts or our own fears and worries, it is very, very possible that one person out of 2 people who are having sex or sexual acts or a relationship can experience that act or that event very differently. Yeah, really differently. One can experience it being very consensual, and the other person can experience it as being completely non-consensual and traumatizing, right? We'll take it down to a really light example. I said with the argument, right? I've seen couples that I've worked with. We also work with couples where we sat them down and had them have a conversation in front of us. And sometimes this is through a particular conversation structure. And we've seen them time again listen to each other, but not really listen to what was being said and interpret what was being said through a filter or perception of reality that isn't actually attached to what's happening in this moment. And I very much know from talking to, I've talked to countless women about sexual assault and rape, numerous partners, friends, women that I've slept with, past just people I've known even through Instagram. And more, as I say, with this piece about perception, I come to realize that it's very easy for us to see things very differently, right? There's one particular incident, and this is less about perception, but more about the fact that I had a friend that was raped when I was at university, who I was very close to, which was very, not just eye-opening to me, but I really saw how the legal system worked. It's quite a violent thing that happened, and there was a lot of evidence to show there was clearly rape. There was violence, there was bruising, there was pain. It was interrupted because of a friend. Actually, it happened in a public place late at night. And the way the court dealt with it was, well, the way his prosecution team, I think we call them, his barrister, worked with us basically by pointing out that, she has slept with lots of people and she's very easy. And that's how we often look at, rape. We look at the victim and we dissect their character, right? And this doesn't make a difference whether this is men or women. I don't know the details of Kevin Spacey's case, but I imagine that was also a piece, because it usually is the way that we deal with rape when it comes down to it. We question the victim's character, but this is a slightly different thing. One of the things we can also understand is and I'm sure men and women, if you listen to this, you've experienced this, where you have maybe seen a man or woman and thought, oh, they're really into me. You see all these signs that they desire you, that they want to have sex with you, or they want to do, spend time with you and so forth. And it's been on your mind, and then maybe you make a move and you realize that you've got everything completely wrong, right? And they're just friendly and they want to be friends. But part of that is that we want to believe that that person wants us and desires us, right? Again, our perception of a situation can be different from the situation it is. So when we're under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and even our own thinking, right, as well, we miss things that people say, we misinterpret verbal cues, we completely miss non-verbal cues, right, when they don't always align with the thing that we want, right? Something that's really important to realize in your life is you're not seeing and hearing reality as it is. We are often deleting bits of information when we don't feel that they tally with our beliefs about ourselves and the world, right? And this is like a coaching and therapy 101, right? We are always deleting information from events that have happened in our lives, right? It's a constant thing. And this is something I see so much, right? And I think it's really difficult, and I'm going to get back to my own experience here. It's really difficult to assume that experiences are consensual when there's alcohol and drugs involved, and addiction and lust and desire, right? Because we're not really fully connected to the other person. We're overcome by lust and desire for sex. We are completely under influence of drugs and alcohol. If any of you have been drunk, I'm sure many of you have been drunk, right? And you've done things and looked back and gone, wow, what the fuck? I can't believe I did that. I didn't even know what was happening, right? So it's very, very strong, I think, of Russell to come out and say that every single relationship and everything that happened during a period of time when he was, going for addiction and drunk and drinking and in celebrity and so forth was consensual. Because can he be 100% sure that it was consensual? Just because he thought it was consensual, and at the moment he thought it was consensual, it may not have been consensual from the other person's point of view, right? And this is the nature of what's happened. And I'm not saying he's lying or not lying. It's both possible that he believes it's consensual and someone else believes it wasn't consensual, right? And this is the nature of perception. And this is why, rape is a very difficult thing to deal with in court. And I think some of the ways that it's dealt with are pretty poorly. But the nature of a perception means that two people can experience the same thing and view it very differently. And it doesn't make someone lying. It doesn't mean someone's lying or someone's not lying. or bending the truth. It's just that the way that our brains work is that it works through our perception, our opinions of ourselves and other people. So if I believe that a woman really wants me, really desires me, and I've been drinking all evening and we come into contact with each other and I think I'm desired and she's into it, she wants me, we might be kissing, we might go back to my place, and I'm in the thinking that this is what she wants, this is going to be amazing, this is going to be great. She could very much be in the thinking of, I don't want to do this. I'm afraid that if I don't go along with this, that I'm going to get hurt in some way, right? That is very possible. And you might go, oh, but she'll say that. No, we will get into trauma and trauma responses. And, one of those is fawn, one of those is freeze. So it's very possible that has occurred in my life, right? And this is a very difficult thing to sit with. And like I said, I sat with this for five days thinking about it. It is completely possible that there is a woman out there that believe, think or feel that I raped them. My intentions have been incredibly good over my life and really pure to create co-create passion and love. But I also know that someone else could have a different interpretation experience of the experience and events and sexual experiences I've had. And this is true of us all. Man or woman, right? It doesn't really make a difference, but someone could have a very different experience of a sexual act that you did with them. You may think it was consensual and fun and enjoyable, and for them it was the most traumatizing thing that ever happened, right? Because you just experience it very differently based on your life experience, your beliefs about yourself and other people, your beliefs about, the world, the beliefs about sex, and what was going on for you in your mind at that time, and it just wasn't surfaced through voice and sound and said and described. And this takes me back to Russell, is that he's done so much work and spoke to so many wise people and spoken about the nature of perception and consciousness so many times and talks very openly about trauma, that he knows that it's not what happened that traumatizes people, but the story that they tell themselves about it afterwards. So he knows full well that he can't be 100% sure that things were consensual, because we can't be, because we're not in someone else's mind. And always assuming that other people will say something if something isn't consensual is also, we all know that in life we've had experiences where something happened that's not consensual and we just went along with it because we didn't want to make a fuss, we didn't want to cause a problem, we didn't want to maybe potentially put ourselves in harm's way of pain, of ridicule, or being shouted at, or being coerced, or something like that. And this all means that he cannot be sure that these allegations are 100% not right. And this can be hard to sit with, right? Because I've had to sit with this idea. And as I've said, it's very possible there's a woman out there or women out there that believe that in some way that I've harmed them sexually, right? And I sat with this for a number of days and had to come to conclusions, especially in the work I do here, that could be a possibility that could occur. And if that was to happen, then I would have to sit with it and listen and try and understand. And I think that's the thing that surprises me somewhat about Russell here, is that instead of dealing with the allegations by going, okay, I need to look at this because this was a period of my life that's very cloudy for me and that I was under the influence and doing this and that and the other. So I need to look at this evidence and think, and I'll go away and think about this and come back to you. He's basically refuted everything, but he's gone a step further and he's engaged in his conspiracy theories, right? Of the world is against me and the media are trying to fuck me over. And I think this is a bit of a if you've seen the movie Lucky Number 11, a bit of a Kansas City shuffle. He's getting everyone to look in a different direction, so they're not looking at the actual things that's happening. And I'm not saying he's actually guilty, right? Guilty or not guilty, I don't know, right? I don't know the evidence. But we must really look at how we look at public figures, friends, and ourselves when these sorts of things come up. Instead of going to this person's a good person, this thing must be untrue, we must really come to that this is a possibility because of the nature of perception. It doesn't mean anyone's lying, right? And it doesn't make someone a bad person. Russell Brand isn't a bad person. Russell Brand just happened to also be, have multiple types of addiction and probably done a lot of questionable behavior in his life, right? That may have hurt other people when he wasn't fully aware of how his behavior was impacting other people, right? And I think that when by the public, we jump to an idea like, that's wrong, it must be wrong, he would never do something like that, they must be lying, they must want money, we are not really tackling the issue that sits underneath, the real issue, which is the experience, right? The possibility of it, because it's uncomfortable for us to feel and think like, maybe I am also guilty of something like what he's being accused of. And I think that is the great uncomfortability that many men have to sit with, because it's possible. If you've been highly sexually active, you've been very promiscuous, you've slept around a lot, you've had a lot of sex while on drugs, then the chances are that there's somebody who didn't really want to do the things that you did together, right? Because that's just the nature of when we do drugs and when we do alcohol and so forth, that our perceptions are skewed. And we become much more easily seduced by our own thinking and our own lust and our own emotions, right? And so forth. And it's just that, we have to be honest with ourselves as men, as people, but particularly as men, I'm talking to men. It can be very uncomfortable to sit with the idea that, someone out there could feel like I have sexually assaulted and raped them, because then you start to go, okay, I'm a rapist, I'm a bad person, and all these things. And it becomes very difficult to hold that in your psyche about yourself, and you want to push it away and say it's wrong. But the truth is, it is a possibility. It doesn't make you a bad person that it is a possibility. It just means that you have been sexually active. And if we layer on this another factor of the fact that many of us were never really taught about consent until a very late age, like myself, I never really talked about consent when I was in my late teens and early 20s. As a thing, you kind of assume that, okay, you're with a woman, she seems keen, she's at your house, she's naked in your bed, that she wants to have sex. But that isn't necessarily the truth. And I come to learn that many years later, right? But a lot of us have made assumptions about the people we're having sex with, not really based on actually asking them, hearing their voice, and really tuning into, their thoughts and feelings in the moment. So yeah, this is my take, and it might sound quite heavy for some people, but I think it's an important topic to cover. And like I said, I'm not, I've met Russell, I was sat on a panel talk with him, and he seems like a really nice guy who means well, right? So there's no assassination here, but I think that this is a moment of being like, these sorts of things occur in the world, and they occur because we experience moments very differently to each other, right? And it doesn't mean that just because her perception is that it was rape and his is not, that his is right and hers is wrong, or either. Is actually to stop and go, right, if her perception of it was so different from mine, what is there I need to understand about her perception that would enlighten mine and add to mine, so that I would understand the event from not just my side, but someone else's side more, and be open to listening and understanding. Because when we learn to openly listen and understand, we grow in awareness and understanding of our impact on the world and other people. And in that moment of listening and understanding, we may start to think, oh shit, so you did this thing and I thought that meant that you wanted that. And they're like, no, actually that meant that I was a bit scared, and we start to add to our bank of information and responses in the world. But to just outright say, this can't be true, it's impossible, it's 100% not true, right, isn't coming from a place of deep awareness and understanding of the nature of perception and people's different experiences in the same event, right? So yeah, it's a tricky one, guys, and this is just my 5 pence, because like I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'd written some stuff about this, but I hadn't published it anywhere in the world, because it's a hard topic. I spoke to my partner about it. I think I even mentioned it to some friends, and it's uncomfortable to sit with, because there's a lot of emotions arise around, like, oh my God, like, you start to question, there's maybe some women, if you're a man listening to, there's some women that you slept with and they never called you back and they never wanted to see you again. And you start thinking, shit, like, did I do something? Did I hurt her in some way? Or you might start thinking to yourself, like, there's some blackout nights where you don't remember what happened, or there's, I don't know, there's some moments in your life where you might look back at and start to wonder, right? And that can be difficult to sit with, because you just don't know, especially, like I said, there's been drugs and alcohol and so forth involved. You become really disconnected from other people and what's really happening in that moment. But I think this is important work to kind of sit within these moments, instead of just coming to a judgment and then vehemently defending that judgment of somebody else in particular, or yourself, without actually sitting with the possibility. Because when we just go to a judgment of right and wrong, or yes or no, it stops us from actually becoming more aware and understanding more. I know it's much easier and it feels much better to just get your decision and say, yes, that I'm right and they're wrong, and just fight that battle. but through listening, we can learn how our behavior impacts other people, and also learn how other people perceive us and how they receive us, and how our actions are perceived and responded to by other people. And that helps us learn to be better people in general. I think I'll stop there. I've gone on for 20 minutes. That wasn't my plan. But yeah, this is an interesting topic and it will rumble on. Like I said, I have no either way with Russell. I think it would have been great if he had kind of stopped to take it all in and process. And, you know, I'm sure he's had a week or so, whatever. But to really dig into the possibility of this, because the chances are, I've had enough sex in my life, and I've had enough drugs in my life, and I've seen enough things happen in front of my eyes with other people to tell you that under the influence of those things, even under the influence of fame and power, we become drunk on those things as well, and they really skew our perception of situations in ways that, you know, most people can never really understand. So yeah, that's this episode. You know, if you're a man and you're looking for support in terms of dating, relationship, and intimacy, that might seem strange for me to mention this, but this is the level of depth that I'll take people to be with their feelings and emotions, and with no judgment, because like you've probably heard, I have no real judgment on Russell for this. But often we don't go to these sorts of topics because of the shame we feel about things, you know, and shame will get in the way of us actually looking at ourselves, and shame will get in the way of us not leaping to, because shame will make us leap to a yes or no, a right or wrong. So, and in moments like this, it's really important to self-reflect on ourselves and how things have been. And if this is something that you worry about for yourself, which, you know, I think every man who's probably slept with a number of women should have a long think about, and not really going through them and going, oh yeah, she was definitely happy, because you can't be sure. You really can't be sure that just because you think they enjoyed the experience and it was happy and consensual, that you cannot be 100% sure, because you're not inside someone else's mind, and they may not feel comfortable to voice that after the action or even years later, right? And it's just to sit with, this is the nature of having sex, but also if anything did come to you, any allegations did come to you, is to be open and listening. And if we take this beyond rape and we take this into our relationships and our communication, is to realize that perceptions of any conversations or any incidents always have 2, 3, multiple angles and perceptions, and is to sit and listen and understand those before we say that someone is wrong. We can say that someone misinterpreted things that happen, because that also happens, but we can also look at how we communicated that can cause those misinterpretations or the assumptions we made in certain circumstances. But I'm definitely going to stop there. Yeah, thank you for listening. I hope this has been insightful and helpful in some way. And yeah, ciao.